So today, what we're going to be talking about are opportunities for advancement, but also challenges with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field of wetland sciences. It's a very important topic as many professional societies, but society as a whole is seeking to do better by large populations of marginalized groups that have been historically excluded from different places or different spaces, but now trying to right those wrongs. And convening this conversation, we have both or delighted for this conversation to be sponsored by both the Women in Wetlands section and the Human Diversity Committee. These are two very important committees that are working to make the wetland sciences much more diverse and make sure that spaces are made for people to see themselves represented and see themselves being included. So I want to read you a message from both of the leaders of those respective groups. First, we'll start with Christina Amron, who is the chair of the Human Diversity Committee. And Christina is unable to be with us today due to the Hurricane Helene that has impacted the Big Bend area of Florida, the Gulf side of Florida, which is a place where I've spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours doing research. So it's very near and dear to my heart. But also we've seen those impacts extend much further inland, and with all the flooding that we're seeing in Georgia and the Carolinas. So lots of damage taking place. Hopefully that the people who are being impacted are able to get the resources that they need. But we also have to be sure that we can contribute in whatever ways we can, whether that's financially contributing, volunteering, or even if you feel that voting is the best way that you can kind of show your support for those communities and other people that experience hazardous situations in the United States. So with that, I'll move to reading the message by both Christina and Mo. So Christina's message reads, our Human Diversity Committee, led by Christina Amron, was unable to attend, but she's passing on this brief message for me to share with you all. First, the committee has been offering and participating in chapter meetings upon request. This includes virtual and in-person annual meetings. We have participated in recent South Atlantic and Mid-Atlantic chapter meetings, and we plan to contribute to the upcoming South Central chapter meeting. Please reach out to Christina for more information on these presentations or to request a presentation. Second, Christina wants to hear from you in general. She's interested in new ideas and new committee members, so please send her an email with recommendations for conferences to attend, virtual meetings, and other interests. And lastly, she wants to stress her thanks. Following the South Atlantic chapter meeting and the recent SWS chapter leadership meeting, she's been receiving more interest in our meetings, in our committee and activities. These are great DEI and industry-related discussions, and she wants to keep the momentum going. And next, I'll read a brief message from Mo Wise, who's the chair of the Women in Wetland section. The goal of the Women in Wetland section is to promote the success of women in the field of wetland science and management through mentoring, networking, and education of both female and male members of SWS. Despite the gains in representation of women in scientific fields, the number of females still lags behind the male colleagues, the number of male colleagues. Women in Wetlands encompasses members interested in participating, promoting the full participation and success of women and other underrepresented groups in wetland sciences. Membership is open to all SWS members, and male members are particularly encouraged to join. So very briefly, my connection with these two groups. So I was first attended the SWS annual meeting in Providence, Rhode Island back in 2015, which the annual meeting will be there again. And that was a really great opportunity for me. I was able to go to that meeting due to the Human Diversity Committee's Swamp Award, which selects 10 undergraduate students to go and attend the SWS meeting and participate and get membership. So it was a great opportunity for me. But as part of that attendance, Vanessa Lougheed, who leads that program, also has all of the awardees go to the Women in Wetlands lunch. And so at my first SWS experience, not only was I brought there and introduced to the Human Diversity Committee, but also introduced to the Women's in Wetlands section. So it's these two committees have really been a big part of my time in SWS. And while I haven't been involved in Women's in Wetlands as much as the Human Diversity Committee, which I'm a part of, they both represent very interesting intersections with my time in SWS. So with that introduction to the space and who has helped convene the space, I want to introduce our panelists. So first, one of our panelists, I don't think will be able to make it, Dr. Swapin Paul, but I will still introduce him. He's a professional wetland scientist and senior wetland ecologist and an adjunct researcher at the Charles Stewart University in Australia, as well as the former lead of the Sydney Wetland Institute in Australia. Swapin is also the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Standing Committee of the SWS PCP. Now, Swapin is clearly doing a lot, but he's also in Australia, which is like 3 a.m. right now. So he is unable to make it with us, but still want you all to know who was planning to be here. Next, of our two attendees who were able to make it, we have Alexis Jackson, who goes by AJ. AJ is a PhD student and NSF GRFP Fellow at the Engineering School of Sustainability, Infrastructure, and Environment at the University of Florida, my home where I got my PhD at. So AJ will be one of the next great wetland scientists to lead that program, very storied program. And next we have Chelsea Nitch, who is the chair-elect of the SWS Women in Wetland section and the head technician within the Global Change Ecology Lab at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. So AJ and Chelsea, thank you for joining us today. And yeah, so we are going to start this conversation. And so with the first question, I'll pose it to you, Chelsea. Can you tell us how you first got interested in wetlands and decided to pursue wetlands as a career path?
Absolutely. I originally started as a pre-med student. I thought I was going to be in the medical profession field. That was my goal. Until I found a brand new class that had started, and it was wetland ecology and biogeochemistry. And actually, a friend had said, "Hey, you should take this as an elective." And I took it and immediately fell in love with the idea of wetlands, soils. They're amazing, learning so much about them. It literally changed my entire career path from that point on. And yeah, I showed interest, talked to my professor and was like, "Hey, I'm changing everything for this. This is kind of my whole new thing right now." And she said, "Well, I have a lab here and we do aquatic biogeochemistry. Would you like to volunteer, at least see what it's about?" And I did. And from that point on, I worked there as an undergrad, was their laboratory manager, and then I did my graduate program with them at the University of Central Florida. And yeah, I just really fell in love. And now I'm, in a federal side of things and about to relocate. So I'm, in transitioning careers as well. So this is, that's pretty much my story of how I began in the wetland field.
Awesome, thank you. AJ?
I came into college pre-med, and then my sophomore year was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not happy. So I went to my academic advisor at the time, Dr. Stephanie Vachelle, and I was like, girl, just lead me somewhere. Just give me a direction to go in. And she put me in a class called Phage Hunters, which was not related to wetlands, but it was my first experience doing research. And I realized I liked it. I like going into the field, collecting something, and then bringing it back to the lab. And she sent me to a research symposium at Virginia Tech. And I met these two women, Meryl Mims and Erin Hotchkiss, and I kind of got to start in wetland science that way. I worked underneath two graduate students, and we were like catching tadpoles, at the time we were catching frogs, and then we were like looking at tadpole growth. And I actually enjoyed it. I couldn't believe that I was catching frogs, and I caught the most frogs in the first night that I was out there. So that's like how I got my introduction. I kind of just stumbled into wetland ecology and then realized that there was so much to do and then stuck around. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So since Swampin isn't here, I'll be more vocal, not just be the host, but a conversationalist with you all as well. It's very funny that we all had these pre-med ideas. And similarly for me, my sophomore year of undergrad, I had the idea like, I'm going to go be a medical doctor. I want to cure people. Organic chemistry one basically destroyed that dream. I limped through it with a C, but I was still like, well, I can be a medical doctor. OChem 2 came around, first day of class, the professor, I remember where I was sitting, pointed at the board and said, if you don't remember these 20 reaction mechanisms from last quarter or last semester, not going to do well. Looked up, basically saw nothing I remembered or knew. And so my dream of being a doctor just evaporated in my face. And it wasn't until the beginning of my junior year that I realized, wow, like wetlands could really be something that you're very passionate about, you're motivated about, a lot of overlap with my life. And so my wetland journey began my junior year of college and been on that journey ever since. So but it's funny the different paths that people take to wetlands. I would say I know very few people who were like, yes, wetlands, I've always known that's where I want to be. Most of us kind of find our way in the mud eventually. So with that, I'm going to pivot to you, AJ. Can you describe the social environment and the sense of belonging you've had at different stages of this wetland journey, which um, traveling through wetlands in real life is always challenging, but
Yeah.
sometimes that personal journey can mirror the real world.
Yeah. So like I kind of said, I started off pre-med and I actually came out of high school very decorated. Like I was very well into the pre-med world by the time I left high school. So I was like set that I was going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. Then the thing happened where I was like, I'm not enjoying this. I actually feel like this is too competitive. I don't feel like I'm actually helping anything or helping anyone. So like I said, it's with that first class for phage hunters. And I was like very lost because I wanted to find an environment like or a topic, a theme that I wanted to like spend my rest of my life working on, but it felt like I was actually doing something, like I was actually impacting somebody. Um, and so that led me to that research symposium where I met Aaron Hotchkiss and Merrill Mims, and then they kind of like took me underneath their arms, which was really nice because I started from one lab and then moved to the other one, which kind of like led me into wetland biogeochemistry. So I was getting more into like understanding how to code, understanding how to like to curate your own research project, which was really interesting. And at that time, I was like a sponge. I was just like trying to just absorb any information I could, like absorb like what should I be doing in wetland science. Like you can go biogeochemistry, you can go ecology, you can go policy. There was just so much to do. And then from there, actually, Erin Hotchkiss is what led me to University of Florida in a way. She had sent me the EPA's National Wetland Condition Assessment call from University of Florida, and she was like, your advisor, well, the person who was the advisor over that project, and now my advisor, she was like, this person is a great mentor and a great advisor in Florida. There's no better place to be than Florida for wetland research. Which kind of like led me to this place now where I feel a lot more secure. Like I said that I kind of knew my junior year, really my senior year, after I went to my first Society of Freshwater Science, which was my first conference I ever went to. I kind of knew that I was going to stay in wetland science because I had met so many wetland ecologists and they just seemed like they loved their life. And I was like, I want that. I want a good quality life. I want something that I feel like my research matters and that I can go home and still feel like I have a good work-life balance. So my stages really went from like super confused to like sponge-like to very secure. Like I feel like I have great mentors. I feel like I know exactly, well, mostly exactly what I want to do with wetland science. And I mean, that's obviously fluctuated too in between my stages. Like coming from undergrad to grad school, it's not like I knew exactly what I wanted to study in grad school. So like that, just like leaning on my previous advisors and kind of just like asking for advice when I needed it has really like helped me stay like stable in this, pursuit of becoming a wetland scientist and act like a doctor in wetland science. So yeah.
Great. Chelsea?
Yeah, I can kind of relate to the aspect of being really confused and then it kind of all coming together in this unique and beautiful way for each individual person. I think for me, when I joined this lab, that was, being in a lab setting was very new to me. But being, with all of these new people and different levels, you had volunteers such as myself, you had um, different graduate levels like PhD, master's, and then this advisor, just understanding the hierarchy and fitting in and also being a sponge, just like you said, AJ, was essential for my whole process there. And yeah, I think just having people to lean on and learn along with you from, lab mates or classmates or anything like that was really impactful for me. And At my school, we really didn't have a wetland section. Like that one wetland class was all we had. We had nothing on soils, not even agriculture. It was very sad. So I relied a lot on, my lab mates and their knowledge, as well as, oh, I'm going to borrow a textbook and I'm going to learn as much as I can about soil formation and all of these other things outside of class. So I think just trying to find your people to where they will, be along with you, learning with you, absorbing everything, and, you all just kind of find your way and your path in this field.
Yeah, it's all actually really amazing to hear that you all have been able to not only find the support that you need, but there were support structures basically at arm's reach and willing and able to help you, which not all undergraduates experience in their research career. I can echo everything that you all have said. I felt extremely supported getting to this stage, even just with the idea of I told my undergrad advisor in my junior year, hey, I want to go get a PhD in wetlands. And his first question to me was, well, what exactly really do you want to do? And I had no idea. But he knew two wetland scientists in the department, and he set up a meeting for me to meet with them. And they both helped me start down a research pathway. And so someone who knew that they didn't have maybe all the tools to support me in that moment, but quickly pivoted me to other people who were able to do that. And that was like I think back on that moment a lot, and when I'm in a position where I'm giving students advice and thinking about how crucial it was for him to say, like, you know what, I'm not the best person for you, but here are two better people for you, and really having that humility. So finding advisors and people around you who are humble but also willing to kind of give you everything that they can if they can give it to you is really crucial. So wetlands often require fieldwork and being in different environments. And sometimes those environments can be out in very rural areas. Sometimes those environments can be a wetland in the middle of a city. So this is a question that's not on the sheet that I pre-shared, but given how much things have changed already, maybe can both of you talk about kind of some of your fieldwork experiences and how it's been to be a wetland scientist in the field and kind of what challenges you have experienced that you want to help others understand and prepare and navigate for. And I'll go to Chelsea first.
Yeah. Also, sorry if there's a weird sound in the background. I think they're doing construction. It started right as this began, so perfect timing. But I'd say it's a really good question, Elliot. I mean, the fieldwork aspect is it's an interesting one. It's probably my favorite aspect of being in this field. However, it comes with its own challenges being a woman in this field. My own perspective is that you can get looked at as if you don't know much. And that's a tough position to be in. For example, being a young woman in the field as a graduate student, I would go out into the marsh, not alone, thankfully. I had others, but most of my undergraduate assistants were female or non-binary, and they would be along with me, and I would be at the boat ramp with a boat, loading it in, and I would get all these looks from everybody at the boat ramp like, do you know what you're doing? I'm going to watch you every second of the way because I don't think you know what you're about to do here, loading this boat in and, trailering it and everything. And you'd get everyone stops and stares, and then they politely offer help, and I would politely decline because I have done this a million times up to this point. And, it's the doubt, I think, that kind of you have to block away because people may look at you and have their own presumptions based off of the way you look, your age, anything. And that's not how you are, that's how you're perceived and that's not who you are. So you just got to remain confident and you're here to do this task. You're here out in the field enjoying it. It's a beautiful day. Don't let that get to you. Just do what you've got to do and just keep moving. So that's probably my biggest thing. But other than that, I love the field so much.
Great. AJ?
I've actually been really lucky to not have any like major things happen in the field, which is surprising. I was the crew leader for the state of Florida for the EPA's National Wetland Condition Assessment in 2021. So I was the youngest on my on my team, but was somehow the leader. and with this Black woman traveling across Florida. So you can imagine there were areas that we got looked at crazy, but something that I really appreciate about my crew is that they were like very cognitive of like what was going on in the world. And there would be areas where like if we had to access land, but like it was a house that was like across the street from like where we were going to be accessing, we wouldn't just access that. We wouldn't just cross their area to get to the area we knew we had access, we could have access to. My team would go for me. Like they knew that it was like some random Black woman in the middle of Florida, just like knocking on people's doors might not always sit well with everyone. And we talked about that like very early on. Like there's gonna be some areas where I'm not gonna get out of the car immediately. I'm gonna like scope out the area and then we're gonna move forward. There were plenty of signs that people would have, like plenty of flags that like gave insight to certain things. It was just like we had to be like aware of our surroundings. But I think that was the only thing that I really had like difficulties I've had in the field, or like things that I've had to like be cognitive of, just because I know who I am and I know how like I am perceived. Like I have tattoos. I don't always like look this put together in the field. Sometimes I look like I'm a swamp monster. So some people like they see me coming out of the swamp with all these tools and like all these like random people behind me like, wait, what are you doing? We have to explain like, hey, we're here. This is the, this is my paperwork that I'm supposed to be here. I'm with the University of Florida. So I think it's just like more of those type of things, like just being aware that everybody is not going to perceive me as just like this scientist. I'm just a random person to them. And they might perceive somebody else on my team as a scientist off the rip. And that sometimes it's better to just let other things, like let people go first and then I come right afterwards. So that was, I think, the only thing that was iffy sometimes of being in the field. Other than that, the field is my favorite place to be. This is my favorite wetland from Longio Ranch. So I love my job, but I am very cognizant of everything that's happening in the world and with how I'm perceived.
Yeah, I'm grateful to hear both your perspectives and that they've been overall positive. And I guess I'm at a somewhat of an intersection between two identities here, both racial and gender. And I can say that racially, I haven't experienced anything outwardly negative out in the field, and I spent a lot of time in coastal Florida, but also Louisiana and Texas. And I think for myself, something I just learned over time was that I have to be more forward in terms of like being polite and smiling, just to kind of pre-disarm people who may be curious and may be more willing to come toward me in an aggressive way. And so whenever I'm out in the field, I have the biggest smile on my face, and sometimes that smile is real. Like I really enjoy field work. As a professor now, I kind of hate sitting in an office most of my days. I like planning for field work always sucked, but I really enjoyed it. Um, but yeah, you just learn to kind of disarm people and smile and make it clear that you're competent. Like, okay, like, yes, I am backing the boat up by myself and I know how to do this, and like project all of those things such that you kind of keep away any potential hostility or negativity. Um, and then on the flip side, as a man, I can definitely say I maybe didn't do the best job of thinking about other gender identities or sexual identities when out in the field, because we're often in places where there's nowhere to use a bathroom. And for me, it's just very easy to go behind a tree. But I never thought about for a lot of my time doing field work that that's not as easy for everyone, or let alone like may not be easy to bring up to a man while you're out in the field, like, hey, I need to go use the restroom, because that is kind of an inherently vulnerable position to be in. And so something that I've been trying to do better as a scientist and as a leader of research students and a group is to think more proactively about how do we develop field safety guidelines so that everyone going out has a clear sense of what's okay and what's not okay, and what types of things we need to plan for. And unfortunately, just in a lot of wetland settings, there's not really a place to use the bathroom. So you do need to have those conversations beforehand about what's the protocol and distance from each other and visibility and all those things. But it sounds like both of you overall have had pretty good experiences in the field, and myself as well. But we know that that's maybe not the case for everyone. There are cases of abuse and people just feeling so uncomfortable doing field work, even if they like it, that they just stop doing it. So hopefully we create environments for people to be able to join and be participants in those spaces. Hey, Dr. Paul, thank you for joining us. I know it's very, very early for you, very late, very early. It's what, 3:45 a.m. So thank you for being here. Um, so what the next question is actually, I think, supposed to go to you. Do you want to warm up or can we jump right in with a question for you?
Yes, please. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Um, so before I do that, just everyone in maybe about 15 minutes, we'll be going to the Q&A section. And so if you're in Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to add any questions. And it will be helpful if we have several questions to go through, several questions before we start the Q&A. So we'll start the Q&A at 11 o'clock. Thank you. All right, Dr. Paul Swapan. There's a growing interest in many sectors of society to put more energy into diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. What are productive efforts that you've seen or been a part of with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a great question. And well, firstly, apology from me for being a bit late. You know, the timer has malfunctioned. Sorry about that. But I have been really during my professional period of last 40 years, I have been involved with initiatives, and I have seen many, many initiatives where diversity, equity, inclusions has been at the forefront. Obviously, in last 4 decades, I have seen things improving. Every day, things have been improving. As you might know, I currently live in Australia, and here the gender equality, it has improved so much, so sharply, that it's really noticeable, and that's what it ought to be. So at the wetland sector, I have been now, last 3 years, I have been the co-chair of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Standing Committee of SWS PCP. And this committee has, in last 3 years, has really achieved a lot. Achieved in the sense that we are able to very quickly get together, try to understand that what are those gaps where we need to really channel our energy and then try to make some difference. So we have conducted a survey. We tried to understand the pulse, where things are at the moment. In January 2022, there was a survey, and then based on that, we now understand that what is the baseline situation, and then we are trying to implement some actions. And based on those actions, we can see really there is a huge interest in the profession, and then everybody is coming together. Everybody is trying to help, and then see that there is a real, genuine change in the landscape. So, yeah, the only thing I must repeat is that there has been a, if you like, not a sea change, but obviously there has been a noticeable improvement, noticeable change. And yeah, so in a nutshell, I am pretty hopeful that things will be heading in the right direction.
Great. AJ or Chelsea, would one of you like to comment on this question? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, 40 years is a very long career. And just thinking back 40 years ago, we get to 1984, which as a person born in the 90s, it's weird to think 40 years ago was 1984, but society has clearly progressed a lot. And I'm happy to hear your reflection on your long career that you have seen the changes yourself. Obviously, as a younger person in the wetland professions, we don't always have that clear history of what was behind us, but we can see what's around us. And sometimes that makes us frustrated because it's like we should be moving further. We should be further than this by now. But sometimes having a historical context makes it a little bit easier to maybe understand the current context, but gives us energy to move forward faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have seen at two dimensions. One is temporal, of course, over these 4 decades. Another is spatial in the sense that where I come from. I was born in a very ordinary village in the subcontinent, now a country called Bangladesh. And I was born really in the outer perimeter of the mangroves, the Sundarban mangroves, the largest, single contiguous mangrove forest in the world. So I was brought up in and amongst wetlands, right? And the socioeconomic situation I have faced over there. And then from there, I have really traveled quite a lot. I've studied in Europe. I've moved to Australia, and all these special differences, the workplaces, the differences I have observed. There are, of course, striking differences amongst various these places. But within those limits or within those sort of cultural, limitations or backwardness in some places, if you like, I have seen their improvements. I'm witnessing improvements, and then that's what is a real sign of hope for our profession, not only wetland profession, the environmental profession, and then overall the workplaces all around the world. Of course, there are some pockets of disappointments. Some pockets are really going backwards. But by and large, I think we are making good progress. And I must add that in November, SWS annual meeting is taking place in Taiwan, Chinese Taipei. That's where SWS PCP is also running a dedicated workshop in trying to share our experiences and knowledge, and then also see who needs a bit of help in trying to understanding that further how we can make a more quick progress in this sector. So yeah, I think things are looking better. Thank you.
Awesome. The next question I'm going to address to you, Chelsea. What advice would you give to students that want to engage with wetlands as a profession?
Yeah, I think, my biggest thing is just don't be afraid to get muddy and just soak up as much information as you can. And also just try to be as open as you can to as many opportunities as you see. Like I mentioned at my university, we did not have the wetland resources, let's say, in terms of classes or clubs or anything like that. And, you know, if your university doesn't have a wetlands club, like mine didn't, make one. I mean, SWS is a really great partner for that. And I was able to be one of the founding members. And that was something that I'm really proud of that we enacted because it shows other people who maybe have never heard of wetlands like, oh, there's this club, like I'm gonna join it, see what happens. And then you take them tromping through a marsh or a swamp and they're in love. And you've, gotten another person involved with this and it changes their perspective on these lands. So I think just having fun, putting yourself out there, enjoying the mud, and then everything else will just fall into place exactly how it's supposed to.
AJ, would you want to answer that one too?
Yeah, I feel like I had a very long way to wetland science. And I had mentioned before, like, be who you needed to see when you were younger too. So I tell myself if I had like seen somebody failing forward, like just like trying to figure out what they kind of wanted to get into, like just like take the chance to figure out their actual interests, I probably would have been in wetland ecology a lot faster than the way that I kind of came about it. So that and fail forward. Like I was in biomedical research before I came to research in like wetland research. So like, I was just trying stuff. And a lot of times when you do just try stuff, you realize that you do have interest, but you only know what you like if you try what you don't know if you like. So fail forward. It's okay. Like, you're not really failing if you learn something, but like, I agree with what you said, Chelsea. Like, you really have to just get into it. I don't think I would have ever went out there with those frogs if they didn't like, give it to me like, oh, well, we're just gonna see how this goes, but you just see how you're gonna like it. I would have never been out there with those frogs if I wasn't like prompted to just take a chance. So I absolutely agree with that. It's okay if you don't like it, at least you know now what you don't like, and now you can move forward with that knowledge. So fail forward and be who you needed to see when you were younger. Somebody always needs to see somebody trying and failing and succeeding. So just something to keep in mind.
Swapan, would you like to comment on this one as well?
Well, what Chelsea just highlighted, I mean, that's drilling down further details into the sector, like the wetland sector. I mean, so there is that, various age group, there are various, gender things, and there's so many of us. We are so diverse, humans as a whole. We are so diverse. And that's why it is so easier to appreciate, to respect the diversity than the alternative, because if you want to really discriminate, you have to work harder, 10 times harder than just let it be natural, let it be just happen as it is. So, and that's why I really appreciate that other dimension in terms of our human, those aspects of, age and gender things, and then proportionality, and then our ability or disability. Even within profession, are you a soil scientist, or you are an IT person in wetland sector, or you are a legal expert? There could be, if you want to discriminate, there could be so many, and you could divide every single individual on this earth as a distinct person. How much discrimination and division we want within ourselves? No, the answer is absolutely we had enough. Let's stop doing that. And then let's just respect everybody within their abilities or limitations. That's it. So yeah, that's a great way that Chelsea has put that aspect. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to be moving to the Q&A very soon. Maybe I'll start with AJ. If you have any kind of closing remarks that you want to share with the audience before we move to the Q&A.
I don't have many comments, but I really want people to just like, if you have the time, like figure out what like community-based organizations that work with wetlands or work with environmental areas that you have like in your actual local environment. I've been really lucky to have plenty of organizations that are kind of like in Gainesville, that are kind of wetland related, kind of just like about science communication. But this is a great example of science communication. There are people that are probably in this webinar that aren't wetland scientists, aren't even scientists at all, but like they're taking the time to learn about wetland science. So just the way that you're in this now, like try going to a workshop about like science communication, or even like about like, they had like this organization that was doing like walks through the wetland park here at Gainesville. And it's just like taking the time to kind of like bridge the gap between you and wetlands. I feel like a lot of people feel like they're just like things that are just like arbitrary, them as like stinky and nasty, and they're just like what they are. But the moment you like take the time to bridge that gap and kind of like see how they're working for you and how you can be working for them as well, it makes you more willing and wanting to like to be protecting your environment, to be interested in your environment, because now you realize that, oh, they're not like smelly, stinky things that we just like push wastewater into, or we just push whatever into, we like build over to like have, infrastructure, or like, grow crops. Like they're beautiful, like they're actually helping us, and like they're important for biogeochemical cycles. They have they're important for like habitat. Like you just start to like bridge that gap. So I encourage everyone to like take the time and kind of like see how wetlands are working in your own environment and why you should be caring about them. That's my spiel of the day.
Awesome. Chelsea, last thoughts?
Yeah, no, I love that, AJ. I fully stand with all of that. That's great. I also think kind of going at it in terms of, doing some of your own volunteering on the side if possible, like STEM outreach to younger individuals, people in elementary school. Like I've done kindergartners and they can even understand how special wetlands are to where you start them young and they can appreciate the system before it turns into, oh, that's just a swamp. Like let's just bulldoze it over or whatever. I think just spreading the word about these amazing systems is just kind of my favorite thing to do. And also, while you're doing that and while you're exploring in the realm of wetland science and wetland research, just fighting off those barriers of, external barriers, of gender stereotyping, any sort of judgment that's placed on you, but also your internal barriers with imposter syndrome and doubting yourself. I think just be confident as best as you can. And even if you're not an innately confident person like myself, fake it till you make it because people can't tell if you're fake confident or actually confident. And that's like my biggest thing, to battle any force against you in this field or in life, really.
Awesome. And Swathan, you have any brief last thoughts?
Well, there are so many of professional bodies and then various types of groups. I mean, if you want to, you can really find your one which you can make lots of contributions. You feel yourself strengthened, connected, and then I mean, in my head, I've been saying this thing for a long time that look, we work together, we can really make a bigger difference. 1+1 is always more than 2. So, and that's why joining similar groups, and then you will see that, there is actually lots of strength and then lots of hopes and lots of positive and good things happening around you. So never feel like you are alone. Never feel that you are the only group who are struggling or who are doing good. So yeah, just look around, and then there's always help around us.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Yeah, it's been very insightful conversation for me to listen about others' experiences in the wetland sciences and kind of balance that out with my own experience. Hope for the audience, this has been very informative. We still have the Q&A session, so please ask more questions there. And we will end at the 20-minute mark of the hour. So we're all in different time zones, but at the 20-minute mark, we'll end it. Thank you all for being patient with us. So I'll start with the first question. And I'll ask this question to Chelsea first. And I'm not sure if I'm interpreting this question in the correct spirit, but I think the gist of it may be the wetland sciences are something that most people have zero contact with. And as AJ, as you were talking, most people don't even really think about wetlands or have negative stereotypes. So can you all maybe tell us how your families kind of dealt with the news that you want to be a wetland scientist? Were they excited? Did they have a lot of questions about what is that? Why do you want to do that? Tell us.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think my family was open to it. They were more like, if you're happy, this is great, do it. But being in Florida, doing wetland research where there are alligators and snakes and things like that, that's where their hesitance came in. And I just had to constantly assure them that it's okay. We're doing everything we can to remain safe in these environments. So but I think that just educating them because my parents, like, had no idea the value in function of a wetland, and just explaining that to them, it was very quickly that they were on board with it. It's just education.
Yeah. Anyone else like to add in on that question?
I have to add in on that question. I have to. And let me just say, my parents are very supportive. My family is very supportive. But going from like, oh, I'm gonna be a cardiothoracic surgeon to I'm about to just run around in swamps all day, it confused a lot of people. A lot of people were very interested in that timeline of events. But I think most of my family was just like interested, like, why did you choose to be out there? And in a lot of ways, I couldn't explain that. I would just explain to them. I had these God moments where I felt like I was in the field and I was like, this makes sense. I feel good here. I feel safe here. I feel stable here. So Chelsea, I'm happy you said education, because a lot of my family just like didn't know that this existed. They didn't even know this was like a successful career to have. And a lot of what it wasn't even their shock, it was my shock. Me coming from, I don't ever want to be outside, to like, I love hiking, I love being outside, was a transformation for me as I was getting older. So I think like I had like a mini identity crisis, like as a Black woman being like, do I belong in these spaces? Am I supposed to be here? Like, am I supposed to be on hikes by myself in the middle of the Appalachia? Probably not. But I feel like I belong here and I feel like I can fight to be here. So my family was very understanding, but they were only as understanding as like as confident as I was that this was the right decision. So something to think about if you are deciding to like kind of go into wetland science. It's a great career to have. It's very stable. You will always find a job. Like there are wetlands everywhere, and there's always a need to be helping wetlands. But it's only as like, everybody's understanding of your career or like your pursuit of this will only be as strong as your confidence in why you're choosing it and what you can do in that field, if that makes any sense.
Awesome, thank you. Swathan, I'll ask you the next question, and I'm asking you this question because of your long career. Any advice for someone who wants to transition from the private consulting path back to the nonprofit or research side? I'm sure you've seen people transition between those spaces over your career. So any advice you have, I think, would be appreciated.
Well, I think that's a great aspect in our discussion is I think moving between sectors can be an organic thing anyway for lots of people. Lots of people just do it. It happens naturally. There could be so many different things going on in our families, in our professional life, circumstantial and then locational and other things. And also it is the professional interest. Like I would like to really sharpen my tool in one aspect of wetland sector. And that means that I am naturally dragged away from public sector to private sector or vice versa. So yeah, I think that's another thing is that we should not be in our head. We should not be sort of discriminating within ourselves, in our head that, this is probably more glamorous than the other. This is better than the other. It should be just happening as naturally as possible, only for improvement, only to do things better. But above everything is that am I going to enjoy doing what I am thinking of doing in the future? That's what it is. If I don't enjoy doing something, what for? So and if I am thinking that way, then I think it will just come naturally. There could be occasions of forced sort of situation, those are always exceptions. And then in some cases there could be unfortunate reasons that things happen, but in most cases it just comes along just nicely. And yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We're going to go to a question that's a little bit bigger, and all of you might have thoughts in this, but I'll pose this one to AJ first. And so I think I'll do my best to paraphrase this. But the question is, do you have any advice for responding to pushback against equity, diversity, inclusion activities, policies, or initiatives, and the framing that this person is using is part of their identity? So as a trans person, they often feel dismissed when bringing up things that are important to them and for being included in spaces and feeling welcome. And they're dismissed because it's seen as inherently political to bring up these topics that we're talking about right now. And so, AJ, would you mind
What's
tackling that?
funny? I think people have never told me that because they know that my first response would be like, what do you mean something is too political if it impacts my life? Like you only are able to drive a car because somebody made a law about it. You're only allowed to get this house because somebody made a law about it. So it's just like, I feel like maybe I'm not the right person to ask about this, because in my approach to these things, I'm immediately like, what does that mean to you? Like, what do you mean something is too political if it's directly impacting my life and your life and this person's life and that person's life? So is it too political because it doesn't affect you, or is it's too political because you don't want to ask the hard questions? So I feel like maybe this doesn't have to be everybody's approach, because not everybody is as I'm not gonna say combative. Not everybody is me. So this may not be the way to approach this, but I think always like pressing on is it political, or is this just a hard conversation to have? Like, are you just uncomfortable with the questions and the topics that I'm posing to you because you don't have the answer? And if you don't have the answer, do you just not want to pursue the answer? Like, would you rather be ignorant to that, or are you willing to pursue how to better be, diverse and have equity in this field? Because I feel like that's where the confusion comes from. People are like, oh, that's too political. It's not because they really feel like it's too political. They just aren't educated enough on it. But I also don't feel like it's our jobs to be educating people all day long about things they should want to educate themselves on. So there's a balance there. So yeah, I'm not really sure how to approach that all the time, because I feel like for me, I don't get really tasked with that. I feel like I'm actually the person that's like asked to come on and be like, okay, listen, this is the issue that we're having. Can we have a conversation about how we can be more diverse in this area? Now, with that comes another kind of like knife in the side, because then you're prompted to like basically have another job. Now I have to teach you how to be cognitive of like what's going on, to be open-minded. But I think that just knowing like when to take that job on, like, and when to leave it is like also part of this process, that we're going through. Like, I know my space as a Black woman in this. People want to know my opinions. People want to know how I feel in these different rooms and how we can be making it more, safe for everyone, emotionally and physically. But I think there's like a balance to that. As much as I can educate, I can't educate everyone. And it's not my job to educate. Some people should be pursuing knowledge that I have to pursue on my daily basis too, just like they should.
Thank you for that, AJ. That was a great response. And what I would say to what you're describing is it's often hard to have to be your own self-advocate, particularly when you're in spaces where you don't already feel welcome. And so hopefully the questioner is able to find allies. So sometimes, unfortunately, the best thing that you can have is an ally who would be someone who's not in that demographic group, but still understands the problems and is able to champion them for you. And that hopefully relieves some of the burden that AJ was describing of you're being invited into spaces specifically because of what you represent in order to help address a very specific issue that is very draining. And I'm sure both Chelsea and Swaffin have found themselves in those situations. And so that's something to keep in mind, is to find like-minded people and people who are able to help you in that process, and both diversify and spread out the burden that comes with this, but also make sure you find yourself a supportive community who is able to help you feel comfortable, even if people are kind of pushing you to the side. So we hope that helps. Chelsea, I'm going to ask you the next question, which is, how can non-wetland scientists see more connection between themselves and wetlands? And they give a specific example of people in urban areas of Gulf Coast states.
It's a really great question. That's a tough one. I feel like when I was growing up, I had no idea about all these wetlands that were surrounding me in Florida. And I was more centralized Florida, not necessarily Gulf Coast. But I don't know. I think just getting out and going to this may not be a great answer, but honestly, getting out and going to different trails where there are actually signs that say this is a wetland, and it like educates you just simply based off of something like that you can take your family, you can take your children, you can like go, educate others. And also just I don't know, in Orlando, we have this ginormous wetland that's a treatment wetland that's utilized to treat all of the city of Orlando's wastewater through this wetland. And it's something that people can go to all the time for free and just walk along the trails. Now, mind you, there are alligators everywhere, but you can still walk along the trails. Birding is beautiful. But a lot of people who go there don't even understand that they're in this wetland that is so impactful in treating all this wastewater. They just think it's some beautiful nature trail with a lot of water. So I think that's a challenge that is constantly being faced of like, how can we get more people involved and educated on these amazing systems? And I don't know if I have the right answer. I'm sorry, but it's challenging. I mean, I think starting young is the only thing I can vouch for that, I've done and had the impact on little ones of like, this is a wetland. These are soils. This is what soils can do. They can hold all this water, things like that. It's a tough one.
No, but that's very hopeful. I think what you did is try to normalize wetlands in people's lives, and they are all around us, but these are environments that most of us have been taught that wetlands are stinky or they're dangerous. You'll get a disease, you'll see an alligator, but they are kind of readily available for us to access and engage with if we are willing to look for them.
Wait, can I
Okay.
add,
Oh
use
yeah, go
social
ahead.
media too, with that, because some people don't have access to wetlands like directly in their area. Social media is a thing. It is a thing. People have documentaries about there. Like there have been so many great documentaries about swamps and just like people that use wetlands like in their background. There's like plenty of social media presence that like take time like to appreciate wetlands. And I feel like that's a good way if you are not like directly beside a wetland or like somewhere that is not commutable. Having social media is a great, plus side to just getting your information about wetlands and like starting to appreciate them a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll just briefly jump in on this one. I grew up so I'm originally from New Orleans. Louisiana has, these numbers might be off now due to climate change, but 40% of all the continental US wetlands. And so I grew up with all of these wetlands effectively in my backyard, but I never went to any of them. And people may not believe this, but the very first time I stepped foot in a wetland was in Iowa in 2014. I had never stepped foot in a wetland before that. So even if you have wetlands that are abundant around you, sometimes access can be an issue. And for myself, kind of being poor and living in the city, nature just wasn't something that I was socialized around. And so it just wasn't something I ever sought to go after until I had an interest in it as a scientist. But there are lots of programs and opportunities to do those things. You just have to be on the lookout for them. And so, whatever city you're in, I can guarantee you that there's some type of wetland activity that you can do, and going there with other people can help you socialize that space and see that's part of something that you can do as well. Okay, so I do want to wrap up. I have other things to move on to, and we're already over time. But with that, thank you all for hanging in with us. Was a little bit of a bumpy ride, but if you've ever done wetlands research, that's kind of par for the course. You make all these big plans and then you get out there and oh wow, the river is 3 feet above flood stage. Well, I guess I have a 2 hour drive back to campus, which has happened to me many times. Or you realize you forgot that soil auger that you really needed to install the equipment today. So um, wetlands are fun places, they're beautiful, and they are open to all of us. And as a society, we can definitely kind of push more to invite more people into our professional spaces. As individuals who are wetland scientists, professors, students, researchers, consultants, we can do more to make sure that wetlands are visible and people can see themselves in wetlands, even if they don't have wetlands immediately accessible to them. And using social media, it's made it a lot easier for people to see places that they couldn't normally see before. Uh, and I realized that I never introduced myself to you all. So my introduction can be my sign off. So I'm Dr. Elliott White Jr. I'm an assistant professor of Earth System Science at Stanford University. Um, been working in wetlands since 2014. Got my PhD at the University of Florida with Dr. David Kaplan, who is also AJ's advisor. So David, you're doing a great job. Um, and with that, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for hanging in. Please continue to do your best to uh, work toward efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. With that, see you all next time. Bye.